Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well. Hello, world, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with me, Eyal Shai. And today my guest is Nikolaus Sabathiel. Hi, Nico.
Hi, Eyal. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. And as is the custom in this podcast, we go straight to the depths of the ocean. And I'd like to hear from you what you are going to talk about today.
Oh, yes. I don't like small talk, so this is perfect. So we are talking about don't try your best. That's a principle that follows me my whole life, from personal to professional. And it's a very deep topic for me.
That's excellent. And when you told me about it, I was thinking that it would make an interesting conversation. So I'm really happy to have it. So you already volunteered the information yourself that it's something that's been following you for a long time, and I would really like to hear from you a little bit about your history with it, and later on I'll want to kind of unpack the meaning behind the words that make this slogan or mantra or however you want to call it. So do you want to take us back in time and trace the evolution of this concept in your head? Was there ever a time where you were told to try your best?
I was very luckily raised. I was raised in the Austrian paradise in a very harmonic family. And still, I was a very shy and overthinking child. So my mother told me I was afraid of everything in the world, from loud noises to other people. I was a very, very shy child, and I was searching always for security, right? And I was afraid of mistakes. I was afraid of something happening to me. And for sure, then I was searching for the right way. Is there a right way that I can be safe in the world? Trying to find security, trying to find some level of control. If you are afraid, you want control. And that was a big topic in my childhood. And it was digested in different ways. One way was also with a friend. So this was the first time I really was conscious of this concept of this strange of don't try your best was actually with a friend in the city mall. So in a shopping mall, we were walking and I wanted to tease my friend and said, "Hey, you're walking so strange and so awkward." And he was walking normal, but then he started to wanting to correct himself, like, "No, I'm walking fine." And then he tried to make this cliche walk because he said, "Maybe I'm walking stupid," and started to overthink himself, right? And
Uh-huh.
then he corrected himself and was then he was really walking strange. And I thought, hey, there's something in it. Something happened to this guy right now. Because I told him he's not walking right, he started to not walk right because he tried to. And this was the first time. And then I told my brother about it, and we made a lot of fun with this concept. Like we searched for different other meanings of this, like act natural or act spontaneous. That's all paradox commands, right? If I tell you to act
Yes.
natural or spontaneous, you can't do anything because everything you will do will be just because I commanded you to do an action.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so this was my two first layers of it. So one was for sure fear and uncertainty of the world. And the other one was fascination with this logical, psychological concept. Like, wait, there is a very strange mechanism. And then we found, me, my brother, and friends, we were then also having fun analyzing society and ourselves, and said, there's so often this search for security, the search for doing good, the search for social validation, and this becoming self-aware was sometimes a hindrance more than a help. Um, Another layer was I was playing very intense tennis when I was a teenager. So in tennis, you have a very funny situation because you have to be, on the one hand, very conscious of your movements and aware of the environment, also of yourself. How do you stand? Is everything fine? But you should not become too self-aware or in the wrong way, because your body knows what it does. So, and this is a very intense sport, an interesting sport in this way, that you have to switch constantly from controlling and getting loose, controlling, getting loose. And there's so many parameters in tennis and so many timing mistakes you can do with your attention, with control and letting loose. That was another stage to observe this problem for us. Oh, what the heck now? Why do I think about my wrist all the time when playing tennis? You're trying again to play good instead of letting loose and express honesty in this way and do the body thing that it learned.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and thank you for bringing this into my awareness. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the connection of the idea to being like a scaredy cat child, a shy child, somebody who is unsure about what's coming next? I'm still trying to see the connection there. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. It was so there was a lot of uncertainty and fear and overwhelming of the world as a child. So I remember that I didn't know what others were expecting. I didn't know what my role was in the world in a way. I was very early um, reflecting on this topic. And, on a basic emotional level, it was just like survival fear. Really, it felt very intense as a child. And I became then fascinated with psychology and meditation. In the 90s, this kung fu movies were very modern, like Karate Kid and I don't know, all
Yeah.
this Shaolin series. And so, and I saw this very calm monks, Bruce Lee like doing super cool action and at the same time speaking these wise words. And this, on the one hand, fascinated me and contrasted with my reality of I was in a very safe environment, but felt like in a battlefield many, many times. So, especially for example, in my middle school, it was a very, very not behaving class. A lot of wild teenagers, full of hormones, and because of this class, even the rules of the school had to change. So it was really not that peaceful because it was a sports school. And first, they just filtered the pupils for sports abilities, and nowadays they filter it because of also behavior and
Right.
psychological ripeness. And this was because of my class, and I was suffering super intensely because of this, because half of the boys were bullying each other every day, punching each other every day, and I was just like, what the fuck is happening here? And trying to find security in this. And so I had then also very early puberty and reflected on this. I was like, what the fuck? What is my role there? And how can I find my way? And I saw very early that a lot of people and myself were searching for recipes and security because there was fear. Because I understood already in middle school that fear provides with the desire of control, because you want to avoid the fear, and if you have control you can feel safe. And I was aware very early on with this concept. And then I was researching after, let's let's jump maybe back to the end of middle school then, when I saw maybe the most influential movie in my lifetime till now. It was the cliche movie Last Samurai with Tom Cruise.
Okay, I'm not sure I
Um,
watched it.
yeah, I mean, I still like it, but it's mostly because of I mean, I think it's not a bad Hollywood movie. It's many cliches, like this old Shaolin Karate Kid movies had, with this mental clarity. Then you can fight and kill most efficiently, or some stupid other slogans. But what catched me was the role of Tom Cruise at this time. I was 15. I was really in a deep psychological place. And the character of Tom Cruise was alcoholic in the beginning of the movie and was struggling and fighting his own battles with the world. And then he was brought to this Buddhistic culture and confronted with something completely different. And he experienced something like a ego death, I would interpret it, and came out like more free, calm, and peaceful, loving. And then my travel continued. I bought my first books with Buddhism, my books about Zen, then about how samurai lived, the Hagakure, for example, or Bushido I bought, and all these cliche books that you find on the airport now for
So
self-improvement.
I wanna stop you for a minute and ask, like, if what you're saying is that basically this desire for control that was stemming from fearing things, that's the kind of thing that makes you try too hard, right? Basically is what you're saying.
Yes.
That's when
Yes.
you go off the rails and into something that's unhealthy, because you're trying to stabilize your car that just veered off to the left, but you're turning the wheel too much to the right, and then you're drifting even with less control, right?
Yes. So the big factor is fear and intolerance of uncertainty in this way.
Yes.
So you feel like there's danger, and you see this often with pupils that are or children that were raised in an authoritarian way. So there was a certain way they should behave. There's a is and a should. And if you're not at the should level of behavior, then you're punished. You don't get love as a child. And they often develop a very perfectionistic um, mind, because there's, even when they're grown up, there's a very strong should, and this
There's the
should creates
voice. Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
And so this is like I was raised in a very positive, loving way. I got always love, but I had this fear in myself. I don't know, genetically or something happened. I don't know, but from the very early age, I had it as a baby already. My mom told me. So, and this, um, if afraid, we're searching for structures on the one hand, and for social validation, because we don't have a very strong sense of self in us. We don't stand alone in a way. We need approval, we need social validation, and then there happens something, because the focus switches from the activity you're doing to yourself, because you feel insecure into yourself. So you have to monitor yourself for sure if you feel insecure. And monitoring yourself is then often a very bad feedback loop, because, oh, shit, my face gets red. Shit, I should get it back. I mean, stupid, or try to get fear down by fighting it. It will just get higher and higher. Or you're monitoring yourself in the sport. Am I right now the best one? Am I right now perceived as a good player in tennis, for example? This happens when you feel insecure in yourself. And then this feedback loops of struggles, you try to prove yourself, you try to control the situation, and you're into trying. And trying is good, but you're overdoing the thing of trying, over
Yeah.
analyzing, overthinking, constantly ruminating about this one topic, because there is your focus point. The burning point of your life is something is not right in the
Yeah.
sense of self, and so it has to be monitored constantly. And this don't try your best is a very good antidote that always, on many layers, works very well.
That's great. I mean, the now that you brought into the picture, looking at the religious practices and following a way, whether it's Zen or Buddhism. I mean, Zen is a section of Buddhism, but any sort of thing like that, I think what you're saying is basically look at religion for what it is. It's a prescription, right, on how to live your life. And it's not just religion. Many people who are atheists have the same type of thing in their life which they don't recognize as religion, but really it's another prescription on how to live. And some of these are very soft so-called prescriptions, like everybody's working 9 to 5, so it's just this it's inexplicit, but it's still there. It acts as a prescription. And on the surface, it looks like following a prescription like that is the easy way out, right? To fight uncertainty or something like that, because it gives you this rule book and tells you, if you just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you just go to this rabbi, to this priest, to this holy man, he's going to give you the answers. Your life is going to be very simple. But at the same time, when you subscribe to something like that, I think immediately you get thrown into the state that you're now describing, of actually constantly having to monitor yourself. Are you on this very narrow path that's now the right path for you? So you are no longer, you know rowing a canoe on a still river where you can go like here and there on the Amazon or some great big river. But right now you're actually more like being thrown through rapids in this very steep stream. So it does that connect with your point of how you see this thing, that actually this need to simplify things, but by following a paved path is actually restricting you and making you a whole lot more self-conscious, and by extension worried, anxious, and so on.
Yeah, so this is a topic that had multiple aspects for me personally. On the one hand, I was as a teenager finding more and more out, okay, everybody searches for recipes for life. And at the same time, I found that this cannot be the truth, right? So that everybody just has some random rules they create for themselves, and then they stick very dogmatically to them as they would have been God given. This was absurd already for me at this time. And it was mirrored by my passion for Monty Python that made fun about all these absurd society rules very intensely. And but I searched for this also subconsciously, and I found first this samurai codex, as I said, and Buddhist books, and I was reading them. I was like, what the heck? These are still again recipes. Buddhistic has this and this rituals, do this and this and this way. These are the stages of awakening. Exactly follow them. So that's not what I'm searching for. And I came then to Zen Buddhism because it said Zen is beyond all words. And I said, that reflected me. I said, oh yes, truth can never be a recipe. Truth of reality, truth of expression can never be a recipe or put in words. And it was sold to me in this way. And I started to meditate a lot. And I found a lot of help in meditation. And did this for 10 years, quite intense. I went to retreats and I was ordained even as a pre-monk, and had my teachers. So 2, 3 main teachers I had then at this time. But I found more and more traps in this way. I was like, Zen says you should unleash your mind from all the structures. You should jump out and be honest in your expression. But at the same point, it's very military in its structure. You have to sit like this. You have to eat like this. You have to recite this and this sutra. And sometimes they show you that it's absurd. So there are very good Zen teachers that show you, wait, we're doing this right now just to calm your mind, but they are absurd. We can, instead of the Buddha statue, we can put a Teletubby here, and it doesn't matter. Or we can recite the AC/DC song, but it's about concentrating the mind. This is the best Zen teachers. And still I found that most people got somehow stuck in this Zen. They did Zen as a way to search for security again because they hoped for the big enlightenment moment. They hoped for freeing them finally from the sorrows of life. And then I thought, this can it neither be. Zen as intuitively, and some teachers really teach very authentic, and but still most 90% of the pupils I saw got somehow felt stuck, and myself I got stuck in this. And then I developed myself away from it, and got more into sports again, like Kung Fu I did, still the fascination with the East. But I did also like improv very intensely. And in improv, actually, I found then exactly these concepts, and they know since 60, 70 years what is this mechanism of trying. And they work with it, and they train pupils to get loose, to enjoy themselves and not focus on themselves, but the play itself, the story itself, the melody of the interconnection. And I found there such a grace and beauty and joy in it, that this became then one of my major stages of developing this further.
That's great, and I think it was a perfect segue, because I'd like us, and I still have a lot to say about the path of subscribing to something and then giving it away, and what's the option, and remembering that we sometimes have to just not do anything and do that. And I think we'll come back to it, but since you just started speaking about it, I'd like to explore the the try part of the sentence. So trying, I think, is a very vague word in how we use it today. I mean, obviously it means that you intend to do something, and you don't just intend, but you're kind of on the way to doing it, but it's still unclear if you're actually doing it, right? It's somewhere on that spectrum of action, like between not yet doing and doing, and it's in this weird space between them. And I thought to ask you, for you, if you could connect it to maybe related concepts in the semantic field of the world. Is it connected to striving? Is it connected to, we keep mentioning others, is it also connected to competition in some way? Where do you put this term try in relation to other concepts in your mind?
Yeah. So this is a huge field that influences many psychological, neurological aspects, and also overlaps with many semantic fields. One of these major distinctions we have to make is implicit memory and explicit memory. So we have two ways, let's say in a cliche way, two ways of controlling ourselves. It's top down and bottom up. So top down is mostly descriptive, so explicit. When you play tennis, put your arm back, stand sideways, do this and this. You can talk about it, right? You can read about it. But then there is this implicit part that is actually very, very major part. You have to get the movement into an instinctive way. Sure, you can do it explicit, but then it has to get deeper. So a learning process is often this rhythmic pulsation between explicit. You have to understand it rationally, what you have to do, and you describe yourself, give yourself a recipe. This is how I do it. But then you have to let loose and repetitive, get into it in different situations. Forehand, in tennis, in 1,000 different ways, and then you learn instinctively implicit patterns, when, how to move your hands, because consciously you can't control your hand so fast to react, because reacting is instinct. So it's this, it has to go down into a subconscious and become a habit, a behavior, a reactive impulse, like an animal. But it's a cool way we can train our inner wolves in this way, our own beast. And sometimes the beast does its part when it's trained, and sometimes we have to train the beast again in us. So this is and there's desire. You mentioned desire is often a conscious desire, right? Because it's a need, it's a lack of something. And in a very abstract way, a desire is a problem, like a task. Because if you have a desire, you have a certain lack of this thing. You perceive a lack. So it's like the inverse of the desire is the lack.
Well, I mean, literally, the word want is something missing, right? It's a lack. So that's
Exactly.
exactly what it is. So you seek out something that will complete you.
Yes. And even in neuroscience, and now we come to the interesting part, we see as soon as our body mind perceives a problem is distinguished in our brain as our predictions that our brain makes are not met. For example, if I do tennis and I'm perfect with my forehand, but then I make a mistake, the brain makes a buzz noise and say, some prediction of mine was not correct. And then, pop, self-awareness pops up and say, oh, we need to train the beast better. Something happened there. And this is now more and more coming up in research that exactly this prediction error of the brain triggers self-awareness. This prediction error is lack, it's desire. And then we are here. Okay, I have a goal, and it's good that we have goals. In life, we need goals, we need descriptive, we need to have self-awareness. Where am I in my life? We need to see the big picture in us, with our life, in our family, in the society, at work. So it's good to have self-awareness, but the question is this balance between, I call it the beast and the trainer of the beast. So this is a problem that can lead from perfectionism to OCD to anxieties, depression, because there's an imbalance in this rhythmic. Also OCD, for example, is a very strong illness where they find more and more out that the implicit memory, so the beast is behaving in a way, feels always insecure. You know, you have to control, and give the beast, feed it always security, but it doesn't receive the security. And this is OCD from the most current research.
That's fascinating, and you're shedding such a fresh light on it from my perspective. So, to connect this to trying, do you think that trying is this ill-fitting action that's done with just in more explicitly when? So basically, you're saying trying is doing what you might need to do that thing, but you don't want to do this explicitly. You want your beast to take over, as you put it. You want to do this basically in a state of flow, not filtered through some sort of ego on the way or some conscious effort.
Yeah, so you have this trying is part of every learning process, I would say. Trying is not good or bad. So we need to train it, our implicit memory. We have to feed it with patterns. The first time I learn the forehand at tennis, I have to do it consciously. I have to, okay, how do you stand? How do you hold your hand? You have to be very self-aware at the first trials. And then, so you have to let loose and let more and more movements be habitualized, become implicit. And I would say unhealthy trying is trying to control something explicitly that could be better controlled implicitly. So that's how I personally define then the term also overthinking and neuroticism. You can try to control yourself explicitly instead of implicitly. It would be better. And this is then also wisdom comes from me in when you recognize when to do what. So this is a very important point for me, and also in my practice now, and yes, in my writing.
That's great, and I'll take advantage of the opportunity here to share something from my life, and also I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on it. But in my life, it was quite late. I don't know if it's late. I mean, many people don't come across it at any point. But in my 20s, I found my ancient Greek teacher and started having these philosophical discussions with him, and he's the one who kind of turned my attention to the fact that the concepts we're using in words, like the good, justice, love, these things are actually ill-defined in our mind, that we have the concepts of them in our virtual reality that's happening inside our minds. And you don't want them to, you want them to be elegant in a way, and have this elegance to them as they're arranged in your mind. And by discussing them explicitly through words, and preferably in more than one language, you can actually set a foundation of these concepts in your mind that are then going to carry you forward in life with considerably less confusion, right? So that's the theoretical part of philosophy. That's dialectic, I'd say. And this leads you to a place where you are able to talk to people about these things. And but what I noticed about me is that the first instinct that I had when I started doing these things, when I started understanding the good, when I started understanding these concepts that are very central to actually being able to do well and good in this world, the first instinct was to then evangelize, right? To go and talk to people about these things. And I hadn't realized at the time that here I'm stuck on this explicit level of things where I'm just talking about these things, right? And they're not necessarily applied yet. And even though I knew already from reading Plato and analyzing his dialogues correctly, I knew that he chose not to write things explicitly. Very interesting about Plato. You know, we don't have any writings by him that are masses or treatises. He writes dialogues. Now you have to explain, why does he write dialogues and not just what he thought, right? Well, I'm not going to give it away, but there needs to be a good reason why he did that. And there is a perfectly good reason. And even though I already knew that feeding people opinions is not conducive to understanding, to true understanding, well, that's the level I was stuck at, right? And it took me a longer time to realize that that knowledge has to be applied, and when it's applied on real world situations, that's understanding. And then operating in the real life, in the real world, with understanding, when you're also understanding your ultimate goal, that's wisdom. And it's very interesting what you're just now saying about applying this knowledge, and the fact that you need to learn it explicitly, because it makes me think also of a lot of modern philosophers, right, which are so stuck on this explicit level. And you know, you can just basically talk yourself to death. Like, you can come up with more and more problems that are getting increasingly ridiculous, like the trolley problem, and discuss these things into the wee hours of the night. And just, you can probably make a lot of money like talking about these things and getting people to listen, but you really need to at some point go beyond to that level of implicit action, of something that's just there for you. And it's also scary in a way, because even though it takes a leap of faith almost to really tell yourself, okay, I know what the good is, I know what the right action is, and therefore the next time I'm actually faced with a situation that calls for a very fast reaction, I cannot allow myself to go back to the explicit mode, right? I can just let it out, and I have to trust my work that I did before, that it's there and that it's going to turn out well. And like you say, I might find that there's a problem and that my prediction was wrong. And but that's opportunity for further learning and doing that. And I think it connects well with what you were saying about prescriptions and subscriptions, for people to follow. That's it, right? I mean, there is no such thing as the self. When we look at it, it's a process, not a thing that's there. But we are still each confined to their own perspective. Like, we see, I can only see through my eyes, I can hear through my ears, I can think in my mind. And we, each of us has to be their own scientist. Like, I think this lies at the heart of the problem of not being able to live your life according to somebody else. It's like you must be your own scientist. In this realm of science, there are sciences that we can do and discuss between us and find things about the world, but not when it comes to morality. That's actually the one science where each one of us is confined to their own mind, and each one of us has to do the science themselves. And so I'm just interested of hearing what you think about that, if it connects to the trying in any way, because that's something that immediately jumped to my mind.
Yeah, it's resonated so much and triggered many new ideas. So one thing you said about it is scary to trust yourself and to go from the explicit stage to implicit. And this is exactly this. It's psychological, neurological, really proven that this is an actual fear of letting loose of this explicit behavior. This is if it would be 100 times stronger, let's say, it would be OCD. And we all have to some certain type or level OCD, where we have this urge to stay at the explicit level of control instead of trusting our subconscious implicit memory. So this is something, for example, it's called by, I think it's Professor Schwartz. He talks about the brain lock. You keep in this loop of explicitly trying to make yourself a feeling of security and trust. And one way, he says, to hack this is the thoughts of, or the feeling of not just right, not just safe enough comes up. You say, oh, you tag it with a name, OCD or bullshit or whatever. You tag it, and then you go over to an action, because action signals the body mind, I'm safe enough to do actually an action and not think or control about it. And this is actually used in therapy against OCD. It's a behavioral therapy concept. They say, oh, just the thoughts that doesn't make sense now. OCD, tag name, and you go and clean, or something where you get immediately feedback, right? So it can be cleaning, cooking, cutting something, whatever. Something where you have immediately feedback and action is resolved. And then this implicit memory, this feeling of security can be trained again. So this is right now used in therapy. Another interesting thing you said is the dialogues, the philosophical. There are many reasons to have this psychologically, because they are very useful. First, you have a narrative part in it. It's a dialogue. It's not directly prescribed in an imperative way. The second thing is that it's an implicit understanding. So if it's given like a to-do list, like 99% of the self-improvement videos on YouTube right now, the 5 steps to become, I don't know, a millionaire, and they want to sell them, and or this one weird trick every doctor hates makes you more beautiful. So it's people love security, and salesmen know how to use this. But top-down concepts will not go deep. A dialogue is a form of a narrative that is bottom-up. It's a thing that we have to hunt ourselves, like Reddy would say. Reddy always says he never delivers knowledge just for free. You have to search, hunt for it. And this hunting is a process of digestion, of inner digestion. So that your whole body, your whole nervous system reflects on this concept. It's like Visa talked about this haiku, like a haiku, these Japanese poems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 575.
Exactly. The perfect haiku is like a stone thrown into a pond. It creates its own waves of resonance. You know, when I read a book 10 years ago, it's a different book when I read it now, because the line, Peter stroked the cat, has always a different meaning. And the best poems have this implicit power. They hide implicit concepts. They hide them in some layers between a narrative that our subconscious doesn't defend against it. It's open for it, and it absorbs these patterns, and then it creates its own personal meaning out of it, and then it becomes truth because you don't think explicitly about it, but you have them. That's why I think also cultures and stories are so fucking important. They are so, you cultivate a own personal meaning that is transmitted by narratives. It's in most natural way. And like every poet, every good filmmaker knows that. David Lynch is very extreme in this. His movies are like nightmares or dreams. He doesn't tell you anything explicit. They're very abstract.
Have you read Finnegan's Wake ever?
No, never read it.
Oh, you this is the book for you, my man. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love such abstract books. It's maybe also an abstract book, as you maybe. At least abstract stories, or stories that have some layer of abstraction and deep archetypes, what Jordan Peterson say, they have in them packed. Then there's resonance because we have all similar subconscious concepts, you know. It's not like, I would not say that we have the picture of a dragon in our subconscious, but we know what darkness means on some level. Very personal, but still it's quite some overlap in all humans. What light on the other side means, what love means. I don't know if there's a culture that sees love as something cold, for example. We have this embodiment or high numbers. Why do we say high numbers for big numbers?
Right.
Right? So there's always an embodiment aspect. And the best stories are pre-digested messages for our subconsciousness, like hypnotherapy. They go in and then, like the stone in the pond, make their own waves, and we express them through honest art. And again, in our lives.
That's fascinating, the way you put it, and to me it also connects, like, not in the most explicit way, because that's not the kind of conversation we're having. It's not about making the most explicit connections.
Yeah.
To me, you know, from what I learned about understanding concepts, and also about understanding how to go from point A to point B, right? I mean, in the Meno, a dialogue by Plato, Socrates is teaching a slave how to solve a geometrical problem. And he makes it his point, and he tells the interlocutor Meno to watch for him and tell him if he's telling the slave anything. Okay, so he's making a point that you can teach someone without telling them anything. And now in the dialogue, there's this whole like ridiculous thing about how the soul is immortal, therefore the slave already knows these things and he just has to remember. But discount that. That's a technique by Socrates to achieve something even greater. But Socrates, just through asking, is teaching the slave how to solve a geometrical problem, and he's doing it by taking him step through step and having the slave attempt different solutions, right? And they don't work, and the teacher eventually asks questions in the right direction. So eventually the slave gets it, and Socrates says, well, do this a few more times and you'll be able to know it, right? And Plato in that dialogue is saying a lot about knowledge, that it's really, now to connect it back to people who give you this prescription, the dogma, they for example, they could draw a star for you, just an outline of a star on a piece of paper or rectangle, whatever shape, and they're like, this is it. This is what you should know that this shape is, right? And it just turns out that learning is much more effective if you make someone unwittingly create this shape on paper, not by outlining this shape, but by taking them through the different aspects of this shape as it's seen from different ways, until what is left inside is the shape. That's understanding. So going from point A to point B is best achieved if you actually know what are the wrong turns as well, where they take you. Okay, so it's not just about going down 3 blocks, seeing the red sign, turning right, going down 2 blocks, seeing the green sign, going left. Like, deep understanding is also knowing what you're going to see if you took a right turn 1 block too early, right? If you see a purple sign, well, that means you took a turn 1 block too early. And it's making these maps in your mind that actually really consolidate the concepts that are important to you, and then they're fastened to your soul better. They're not fleeting, they don't run away from you, you don't forget them. Because if you're given the right answer, it's not fastened to anything around it, like it can just fly away with just memory. You're basically just relying on memory. But if there are lots of bits around it that supply the context, then you're in a much better position. Then you can also work by way of elimination. And of course, really, it's more like having a whole space there rather than having no dimensions or one dimension. You have 3 dimensions to explore this place and understand. And I think that really creates a lot more confidence in yourself when the time comes to act according to instinct. And there, it's there for you. So is it fair to say that this would be a type of technique to finally let go of the realm of the explicit and start going down to the realm of the implicit? Like, after you have, for example, learned how to swing the racket in a tennis match correctly, I'm wondering if it would still be wise every once in a while or something to, first of all, keep experimenting to a sense, like to be able to see if you can do the wrong thing and succeed in doing the wrong thing that is actually not conducive to winning the game. But it's actually really interesting if you can hit the ball in such an angle that it actually hits the post of the net, which is really hard to do. And actually, this is not going to win you the game, but it proves that you understand the swinging the right way better.
Yeah, this is an amazing, important point. So you said, like, failing till the form emerges, the right form, for example, the geometric circle. Um, this is a completely different way of perceiving mental maps, because mental maps perceived from top down, a circle is drawn like this, you will never understand first how, why, and the context around it. And you cannot apply it into different forms. So a circle that emerges is embedded in the whole network of knowledge.
Yes.
That's one thing. There's wisdom below the knowledge that carries it. The second thing is that it gives you the tool. If I tell you how to draw a circle, or let's say if I tell you how to do the forehand in tennis, and you believe me and I'm the guru of forehand in tennis, say that's how you do it, then you take over a dogma, and maybe you manage to get it into the implicit memory. Dogmas can come very deep and can never get out of the implicit again. But we never learned that this forehand is not a noun, but a verb. It's a map making always. It's a mental map making. Forehand, I learned from my teacher when I was 8 years old, has to be updated after each step nearly. There's a healthy rhythmic for sure. There's a frequency and an amplitude that is right for updating. But if we get dogmas prescribed, it's a noun. It's a static mental map. And we never learn that map making and meaning in our lives is always a verb. It has to constantly update it. Otherwise, it becomes a dogma and is not fitting to reality anymore. And it's not honest. So this is one point. The other point is you mentioned the aesthetic of the problem. So the aesthetic that emerges, for example, the circle or the right forehand, there's an enjoyment in it, right? When you do the right forehand, there's a pleasure. Oh yes, that fitted, that was well. And there is neuroscience also that shows now that there's a certain pleasure in the aesthetic of mental maps. And probably that's one theory right now, and that feels extremely intuitive again in itself, that aesthetic is the drive for healthy mental maps. That means I need a map that covers reality in a pragmatic way. It should be not too complicated, not too specific, but not too wide. It should be achievable. It has many parameters. It's a multidimensional thingy. And there's a drive in us that monitors our concepts and our knowledge. And the form in this multidimensional realm can be updated and can be beautiful, can be clack. It works, this concept. It works now. And this drives motivation. This drives then motivation in an artistic, intrinsic way. You learn then not to do the forehand because you want to have social validation from your teacher or from your mom, but you enjoy the process of map making. And then the beauty comes out of the aesthetic and the motivation, the drive, and then comes self-confidence out of aesthetic. Because you're not focused on yourself anymore, but the beauty of the forehand, the beauty of the circle, and the play with it, because aesthetic is like an artist and enjoys to play with colors. And then, oh, wow, what happens there? There comes curiosity, creativity in. There comes exploration in. And bravery of exploration. You take risks because I want to know what happens if I hit it with this angle. What if I do this and this? And then joy, childlike joy comes. And this is, for me, one of the most effective drivers for health. To have really this foundation of aesthetic mental map mapping in you. From this, you can nurture your motivation. And this is, I think, what I'm trying to do with my improv coaching also. That
That's
to teach that's the children.
I'm really upset. Maybe this episode will have to be released on video because people don't realize that I'm nodding so enthusiastically, and I have this big smile on my face, and it's just beautiful. I think you put it so well, and not that I don't enjoy talking about it this level, but I want to also kind of take it back to a personal level and reconnect it to your journey throughout the years. So we said that you had basically become disillusioned with a bunch of ways, including one way which kind of said about itself that it's not a way, which is interesting because you know what? I can totally believe the original person who practiced this way did not have this way. But again, just like we said, there's an inherent problem with inheriting a non-way from someone. You're very likely to make it a way. So at this point, after you had become somewhat disillusioned with Zen, what do we see you doing next?
Yeah, so I was super lucky. As usual in life, I was just super, super lucky till this moment. I'm so thankful for this one moment. I was meeting a colleague of mine. I studied physics, and I met a colleague, and she told me from a book called Krishnamurti, Chidu Krishnamurti. You know him.
Superficially, not very deeply. Yeah.
um, he was a very interesting guy who was raised as the new guru of the new age coming to humanity. He was raised by the esoteric sect. I don't know if it was led by British in India or it was a corporation, but it was a huge sect, very, very powerful, 100 years ago. And they took two children, Chidu Krishnamurti and his brother, and raised Chidu Krishnamurti in this sect to be the new Jesus. And they taught him all religions, philosophy, all concepts. And he should really become the new leader. Was really extreme. And with the age of 18, he should take over his power and become Jesus. He stood up on the stage and dissolved the sect and said, truth is a pathless land. It cannot be expressed in any dogma, in any recipe, in any bullshit you try to convince me. He dissolved his whole powerful sect like this with one speech. And this is in itself incredible. A person that was brainwashed from earliest childhood, like the Dalai Lama,
Yeah.
taken from the family, and you're the new holy person. Raised till 18, completely brainwashed. He stands on stage and says, fuck you all, that's bullshit, that's propaganda, that is Nazi-like stuff you're doing. Truth is a pathless land. It's a very famous speech. It's amazing, inspiring, and he dissolved it. He became a philosopher and a guru, and he always fought the guru picture. He said, I don't take pupils, I don't take anybody, but he traveled around the world and talked about this pathless path. That find your fucking own truth. Do your own thing. Research who you are. What are your thoughts? What are your emotions? What is the self?
Do
Find it out for
science.
yourself.
Do science. It's the first person science we talked about.
Exactly. So, and I was reading this book from him. I think it's, I don't know, something with freedom thingy in the title. I was reading it and said, holy shit, this is it. I'm swearing a lot, I'm sorry.
That's good. We'll mark it NSFW for the podcast platforms, no problem.
Good. So I was reading it, and I was already before for sure very frustrated with Zen, and I was a bit already away from this path. But then this book, like, yes, that's it. And I didn't go anymore to the Zen meditation school because I found this absurdity in it. And then I was searching, I was doing sport very intensely, and I was reading his books, but he was a philosopher. He could not tell me how to live his concepts. And I was, what does it mean for me? And I was already much, much more healthy in my mind than when I was a teenager. I was at this stage, I think, I don't know, 23, 24. And I started Buddhism when I was 15. And yeah, not even 10 years I was in there, but very intense. And I was already much more calmer, more self-confident, more embedded in life. But there was still the struggle, like there was something, an itch in me. Something was not yet dissolved. Krishnamurti expresses it in words, but how can I practice this? How can I practice this spontaneous self-confidence, this safety in unsafety, this ever-changing cloud that I am? And then I was going into Bruce Lee. Well, my next step, I found him, and he's again this cliche superstar of action movies, and it's really crazy how all these cliche figures influenced me most, but I like it. My first superstar was David Hasselhoff till now.
Number one.
My gurus were always in the B movies, but that's how I handle them. So I was fascinated by him and his speeches. He was very eloquent, and he said he also learned Wing Chun and this Kung Fu, and like Krishnamurti, he dissolved in his own techniques and styles. He said he doesn't believe anymore in styles because a style is always a crystallization of something that is repetitive, a habit, and then it's sure there are patterns, but you try
I'm
to
nodding again, by the way. I'm
Sorry?
nodding. I'm telling the
Yes.
listeners I'm nodding again. Yeah. In agreement.
And this sentence from Bruce Lee triggered, wait, I try again to find the crystallization. I try to again find the recipe, how to behave, how to live. And I said, okay, I have to go away from this searching. And then I was like, okay, the problem is not truth and how can it be expressed, but how can I still my doubts and fears of searching? How can I stop myself from searching these concepts? Like Wittgenstein said, you realize the problem has vanished when the question vanished. And I try to find out how to tell my inner beast this safety to allow to trust myself, the balance between the curator and the composition, this movement to emerge. And I found then the provocative therapy, and I took seminars in it that brought me near to improv. So these seminars, I don't know, I was always interested in psychology, and I always searched for seminars, I did courses and so, and wanted to become a coach myself. And I found this provocative therapy. And provocative therapy has one principle: your need for safety is turned against your own will. For example, we said before about OCD therapy. Is behavioral therapy one situation is I have to control the oven. If the oven is turned off 10 times before I go out of the flat, right? This is a very common OCD people have. Otherwise, I don't feel safe that the oven is turned off. So behavioral therapy would train you to confront you with the feeling of uncertainty and reduce the controls and so on, and maybe with some hormone therapy even combined to give the body the feeling of security. And provocative and systemic therapeutic would say, yeah, it's right, you do 10 times, but are you really sure? Are you really sure? Maybe you should do it 20 times, and between all times controlling the oven, you should make a little twist with your body and recite the, I don't know, Pater Noster. And I said, okay, doctor, maybe I should be more secure and do better rituals. You're right. And then he does this, and the doctor tells the next time, how did it go? Said, yeah, well, it's good. It's a bit exhausting to do all these rituals, but it went well. You gave me more security. I said, okay, good. But I think it's not enough. The next time you have to do the light on and off 3 times in between each control. He brings their own rituals into absurdity, raising it from week to week into absurdity, but empathically. For sure, if you do it in the first time already in the absurd way, the client will refuse this. And you have also to learn how to read the client. How can you bring him into this absurdity, teach him the absurdity of security. And then there's a very big moment when after several weeks, when the rituals take an hour to perform, that he can leave the flat. That the client says, what the fuck am I doing here? I'm reciting this and singing Pocahontas songs. I'm turning on and off lights. I'm dancing tango in between. What is this? And then there becomes this absurdity is processed more and more deep with more and more humor. And this embodied, because you have to do it slowly, that it embodies it into the implicit behavior. He has doubts over several weeks. And these doubts work against the other doubts. And then he said, what the heck? He comes to the doctor and says, let me alone. I don't do your stupid rituals. And he turns off the oven and goes out of the flat. And it has to work, and it doesn't work with every patient for sure. It has
some of them stay with noticeably longer rituals.
If so, you can always switch therapy again into behavioral methods or something else.
You better, yeah.
Yes, you better. But this is really a method. It's used in provocative and systemic therapy to teach you the absurdity of your own security thinking. In this, it's also sometimes done in a dialogic way. So, for example, if you tell me, yeah, I have a hard time to express my honest opinion, I tell you, yeah, maybe it's good, maybe you should be, everybody expresses his own opinion. And I mean, it's sometimes good you are alone, you have your own peace, and you for sure you have stomach ache because of you're so angry inside you, but you can take pills, right? It's not such a problem. You do it in a laughful way. Maybe I did it now in a bit, it seemed cynical, but you have to adapt this again very empathically.
No, I totally get what you're saying, and I think it's worth just sharing a few facts that I find uncanny. So the time I mentioned to you before when I kind of came across this mentor of mine and things he showed me about what Plato actually did and what his Socrates did in the dialogues, that was around 23, 24. So I think there's a point to be made that um, also there's a kind of absurdity about the current age which we perceive people to be adults, and that's it, where you should just know everything, which usually is like 18 or 21. So that's just a small point, but it's very fascinating to me because in my teenage years I was very depressed, and I had good reason. So I lost my mother at age 10 to an accident and suffered this trauma, and I went into this long depression. And when I started getting out of it with the help of Buddhism, of everything pretty much you mentioned, of absurdism, so Kierkegaard, of Rollo May, so existentialism and humanism, all these isms. Slowly, I got up, and I think there's definitely value in reading these isms, even though eventually you give up on them, just like Bruce Lee and Krishnamurti did. But I find it interesting because Plato is really telling you, without telling you, but inexplicitly telling you that just what Krishnamurti told you, right? It's like you have to read this. I'm not going to tell you anything, and yet you're going to come to understandings on your own. But you have to do it yourself. He like puts the responsibility on you. And what you just got at now with the absurdities 100% what Socrates is trying to do to people. So interlocutors are confused in the dialogues, and they remain confused because they're models. And I would love us to keep discussing this between us later, and I know we will. But if you look at what Socrates is doing with his questioning, it's basically taking things ad absurdum, right? So the right way to go about gun laws in the US, for example, is not to sit there and say, like, tell people who want their guns, look how much suffering this causes. Children are being murdered, blah, blah, blah. They know that. They have their set ways. They have an answer to that. They have an answer. It's in the Constitution. They can just say about anything you throw at them. It's in the Constitution. Now, what are arms? We can look at arms and say, well, arms are not just firearms, right? It's like if you want a really free country, you should really own your own jet plane. I mean, this is just common sense. And why not? It's against freedom not to allow a person to own their own jet plane and fly it wherever they want, not report to anyone. I mean, screw the flight controls and all that. You can do whatever you want. And I mean, also with driving on the road, I mean, traffic lights are just lights. They're just lights. Are you going to listen to lights? What lights are going to tell you what you're going to do? You're a free person in a free country. And, these lines that divide the lanes, I mean, these are just lines, man. If you're a free person, you should be free to
Red
drive.
light, a communistic light shows you the way,
Communist.
American.
Yeah, that's right. And, so it's almost uncanny how we have arrived at similar ideas in like totally different ways. And um but there's something about that I really love about the absurd, and I want to share from my own life. That towards the end of my depression, I think what I learned to do is basically look at things in an absurd way. So my interintellect salon about Kurt Vonnegut was kind of going over that. Kurt Vonnegut was a genius when it comes to bringing you to these absurdities and pointing them out to you, how absurd everything is. And from there, also, there came a realization that it's really healthy to just become, if it's in relationships, to be able to become a doormat, for example. What do I say by doormat? To be utterly vulnerable and let, if other people are going to do something to you or harm you, be able to be in a place to actually allow that. Yeah. And also when facing uncertainty, and reality is going to be uncertain no matter what you do. You can't control it. And that's the point of your uh, of the provocative therapies, I understand it, is to drive this point home. And for me, it was a big moment. It's not actually a moment I can point to, but a process of understanding that there's something so liberating about picturing myself lying in space and just letting all the cosmic rays just go through me without any sort of resistance, just being this passive leaf floating on a river, you know. Um, Being able to do that, and it doesn't mean that I don't have causal powers anymore, that I don't try to do things and try to learn things. Like we said before, you learn things, you do it explicitly, but eventually it's not worth the effort that it takes to resist what's coming. And if you find yourself ill-equipped, or like you don't have the strength to fight what's coming your way, well, then don't. Because if you're going to resist and exert yourself too much, um,
Yes.
you're going to grind yourself into dust, and that's not something we want. So I, everything you say like resonates with me on such a deep personal level, and I understand from you so that you're basically marking a turning point in your story where, I mean, you also, it wasn't explicit in your story, but I'm amazed how quickly it became evident that you turned from worrying about yourself to worrying about others. Like it's something that just wasn't
Yeah.
said, but it's so naturally
Yeah.
followed from your story that you stopped worrying about yourself so much and started worrying about others and caring for them.
Yes. And this is healing. Love is healing then. What is really drove me then there is this absurdity of trying to grasp truth. And then I found this, what we talked before about this, you come aware of the composition beyond. You find the joy in aesthetic map making, in the process itself, in the infinite game. And I express it now again explicitly. It was the years before very implicitly, very vaguely, but it opened me to the life again. It's the aesthetic, the enjoyment of just drinking a coffee. I don't have to make every coffee a philosophical thing itself. I just enjoy the coffee, and it's the composition itself that I enjoy, or talking to somebody, helping somebody. And this trusting, you start to trust and open yourself. Open yourself beyond control. Controlling, you have very strict rules, what you expect from yourself, but also very importantly from others, from the world. And this closes you. You have your own rules, and there are conflicts because everybody lives in its own world, and it's a very wild medieval world. Nearly every village with its own dogmas and clashing in each other. But in this process of opening, I felt then, oh, vulnerability opens to love. And love is a feedback loop, a very positive feedback loop, because love heals your insecurities, your fears. You feel safe in the nest of love. But love is found in the net. Let's say you have to take the leap and the net appears. That's the improv phrase. You have to trust. Take the leap into the darkness. The net will appear. And I would say the net is love. You will land in love. And love is like a tour booster again into so many different places that can bring you where you can jump yourself again and jump with others. And it's disconnects, and this brings you to other people and makes a game possible. And this is where we come to improv, where that's the essence of improv. If I come on the stage with my fixed ideas, I'm the hero of the story, and I will save a child from a lion. But the other wants to bring a story about a spaceship and cooking. There will be so much conflict, and you will not listen to the other person. You will just filter through your ideas. Did he say animals? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's go to the lion. No, you destroy the story, the harmony of the story. So you become, when you go on stage on improv, you take the leap. You trust that something will appear. And you go out and have no idea what is happening. It's really extreme situation. Sometimes with big audiences, and you go there and have no idea what I will say in the next moment, or if I say something. Maybe I'm just a tree in the next scene. So this teaches you so repetitive that you leap and trust others and yourself to that the harmony, the aesthetic of the map making will appear as an interconnected game to each other. And this is really had one of the most greatest healing powers for me then. Like you go on stage and you can be, I can just stare at you and feel you, you know? What do you bring on stage? What does the other bring on stage? Hi, sir, can I borrow this book from the library, please? And then it's bottom up, you know? For sure, you have to correct again, like in tennis, sometimes when there's a conflict, maybe you recognize the story is off, you slowly correct, and then you let off again, let patterns emerge. And improv is one of the best games so far I found to teach you this, because they understood psychologically very, very well already what it means to let go and take control, this balance, this interconnectedness.
That
And that's the beauty.
that's yeah, it's truly beautiful, and I'm trying to reconnect again with the concept of don't try too hard. And seeing about this, something that I see about this is that there's also in tennis, actually, if you do it right in tennis or anything, of course, at this point it's pretty clear that we're talking about life in general here, but let's stick to the tennis metaphor, or example. You should probably try very small things, to learn these small bits of information and get them in you. So whether it's your stance, where your hands are, where your feet are, just a swing, you learn these things each on its in its own right, like not connected to the other thing. You want to do this other thing, but when the time comes, you actually want to be able to move between these things. And it's actually interesting because eventually it's like trying too hard is really the equivalent of of practicing ahead of time, just coming up with this game that you think is going to play out, is like,
Yes.
and just trying to do a rehearsal for the game as it's going to be,
Yes.
you know. This is trying too hard. Instead of having all these small bits of knowledge that you um, now internalized, you are going to go the extra mile, which is ridiculous, and actually rehearse a whole tennis match, only to find, after the first serve, that it's not the tennis match that you had in your head. And now you're fucked, basically, right? It's like, I'm going to lose it. That's not the tennis match. So yeah, it's really crazy. I want to be mindful of our listeners' attention, knowing that attention span, knowing that we could always come back, and I want us to come back and discuss a lot of these things further and develop them. Since you got to what you're doing today anyway, I'll be happy to hear from you. Um, First of all, if you agree with what I just said, and also then elaborate on where people can find you, what you do professionally, and maybe your goal and something else that you'd like.
Oh, it was a great, great pleasure to talk to you. And I mean, yeah, we just opened so many new topics. And yeah, I would love to talk to you as soon as possible again.
Yes.
People can find me by Googling me and finding me there on many places. For sure on Twitter under the tag name Sisyphus. But it's hard. They just should Google me with Nikolaus Sabathiel. Maybe they find my name then anyway when you publish it. And then they find me on via email on my webpage. And my webpage states I'm a psychological coach now. That is a half true thing. This page is for my side of myself that I'm coaching people. But I have a second side. I'm a software developer and technical manager. And I'm working on augmented and virtual reality applications. So I'm between the worlds in this way. So if people want to talk to me about virtual and augmented reality, about computer games and 3D animations, I'm also very passionate about. But also if they have questions or topics to discuss with me, I'm very happy to speak to them. And they find my contact formula on my webpage and my email. I'm very happy to help everybody that contacts me.
That's awesome. It almost seems more realistic to ask you about the one topic that you don't want to be talking about, because your breadth of knowledge is so great. Thank you so much, Nico, and I'll definitely stay in touch. And thank you so much for coming up here and sharing so much, being open and insightful. And
Thank
remember,
you so
don't
much.
try too hard, Nico.
I try my best not to try.
All right.
Have a great evening and thank you so much, Ian.
You too.